Hello! So today we are going to be zooming out and looking at the culture and layout of Elbaf. We're going to look at everything that we've seen up to this point as far as the wider cultural things that we know about Elbaf then and now, and then we're going to zoom in on some of the smaller details that are maybe less emphasized and less focused on, and hopefully by the end of the video be able to extrapolate what we think, or what I think, the final themes and conflict of Elbaf are potentially going to be. But first, a shout out to today's sponsor, Factor. Factor makes meeting your nutrition goals easier than ever by delivering fresh, never frozen, dietitian approved meals right to your doorstep. Their team of gourmet chefs create each meal using only ingredients with integrity to help you feel your best all day long. I sometimes find it really difficult to find the time and the motivation to get to the grocery store, purchase everything that I need to make healthy meals at home, and then when I do the thing and then I get home and it's time to cook, I'm good on dinner, but when it comes lunchtime, breaking up my day to fix a healthy meal, I fail. But Factor has a weekly menu of 35 different items to choose from every week, and they have tons of options. You can do Calorie Smart, Keto, Protein Plus, or Vegan and Veggie. And they have more than 60 add-ons every single week, like breakfast, on-the-go lunch, snacks, beverages. And with all the meals being fresh, ready in 2 minutes, and you get to skip all the prep, cooking, and cleanup, it's the convenience that I want midday without compromising on nutrition or flavor, because I have tried a lot of Factor meals and they don't miss on the flavoring. They're so rich and bold. So head over to factor75.com or use the link in my description and use the code 50MurphyNapier to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first Factor box. That's 50MurphyNapier at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first Factor box. Thank you to Factor for sponsoring this video, and thank you to you for checking them out. First, we need to look at the wider, older culture. The old culture of Elbaf, as we were first introduced to it, is the land of warriors. If there's a dispute between villagers, even a small one, that can't be resolved in words, it's settled by a battle to the death, where the winner is determined by their god. And fighting is a matter of honor. Dying for your village is a matter of honor. Then we get a glimpse of Elbaf in Linland's flashback. I'm pretty sure this is Gerd, by the way, where we see where Mother Carmel and her orphanage live among the giants in Elbaf. Here we learn of the legend of the giant pirates and their strength when they were at their height, when they were at their best. We see that they were open to discussing trade, but they must not forget that they're warriors. So they wouldn't ever give up their fighting spirit. It would be inconceivable to become pacifists. Here we also learn about their reverence for the sun. We learn about the winter solstice and how the purpose of it is to pay their respects to the sun for the death and rebirth of the sun. And we see the terrible fire that burned down their village, but they did rebuild it again. I skipped over some things in both of those chunks of the story because I'm saving that for theorizing, but real quick before we get into the theorizing, I wanted to show you what Elbaf looks out when it's all laid out on one paper. So here's a map. This is a Lord of the Rings map. It has nothing to do with the video. I just wanted to show you a good map before I subject you to mine. Okay, so this is the layout of Elbaf, though the perspective is skewed. So over here we have the port. This is where pirate crews might have a quick reprieve without entering into Elbaf proper, or it could also be the entry point to Elbaf proper. Here we have the western village. This is Dorian Broggy's home. My castle is crooked. We know from the flashback that the sheep's house was very near the western village, so I put it very close because it looks like they had a lot of community together. We also have the gravesite from when Big Mom, you know, killed people. And then it's kind of hard because the perspective of this map is bad because I am bad. But the Warrior Spring section of this part of the map is removed a bit from the Western Village, but it is southeast of the village, so I've put it off to the corner here, but just imagine distance. We also know that there's a forest area where giants do a lot of their hunting of their large game. I think we should view that middle tier of Elbaf, the Sun World, as just dense forest everywhere you look, with a few spots that have been carved out to build villages. Roto's castle is here, and what we saw when they got off the bridge was just nothing but trees. Gerd even told Luffy, hey, go over there and you'll find the village, and I guess that took them to the spar, which took them the rest of the way to the village, but really everything we see is nothing but dense trees. But Dory and Bragi did tell us that there are a number of villages, so the image I have in my mind is just dense forest in every direction and just pockets for the villages. I didn't set out in this video with planning to map all that out for you, but as I was going through rereading these sections, I just could not get a good scale. I couldn't get a good image in my mind of where everything was located, and so I kind of combed through the directional cues that we got and just mapped it. So of course, we know that current day culture has embraced pacifism. The days of the warriors are the days of old, and they have moved on. The wonderful King Harold instituted a reform that turned warland into peaceland. Super effective on the younger generation, but the older generation didn't seem to want it. There was a lot of resistance. But we can see in real time the effect that it's had. When they were kids, Gerd called Hiruden a wild child, but the surrounding voices were encouraging him to keep fighting and getting stronger. Modern day, Colin is called a wild child as the surrounding voices hurl insults at him. They despise him for being a wild child and for fighting. They say that they won't even participate in verbal violence, but in the very next chapter, they do exactly that when the person they're talking to hasn't let go of the old ways. And of course, Prince Loki, who has had quite a bit of a glow up, is currently imprisoned in the underworld for allegedly killing his father, and then the people denied him of the throne. Okay, some theories. So remember that the giants were terrors of the sea, and after they were captured, Mother Carmel rescued them and became the bridge between giants and humans. I believe that this is what began the fixation on humans that we're seeing in present-day Elbaf. I mentioned in the last chapter review that we now have a pattern of giants showing a certain affinity towards humans, and I'd like to reinforce that point here. Obviously, we know Roto caged humans. Gerd has a love for them, but it's at least one step back from kidnapping. And Ripley is common law married to one and has a kid with him. So intermarriage seems to be socially acceptable. We also know that human bones were buried in the snow in the underworld alongside giant bones. Humans were actually even still alive in the underworld in rags with Loki. We also know that the underworld is where prisoners are dropped, not intruders, not trespassers, but prisoners, which kind of sounds like it's people who break the law, people who are already established in Elbaf breaking law, not intruders coming in and then being captured. The other giants also seem to know that Roto has some humans caged, and they don't do anything about it. They don't seem to have a problem with humans being around, but I mean, they're caged, so I don't know. Shanks is accepted and praised and swooned over when he visits Elbaf. And of course, we know that there was a settlement where humans and other races were welcome within the Sheep's House. And I think that it's very possible that when they were kicked out, there was already a human scale settlement. I really don't think when they kicked Linlin out, they lost their goodwill towards humans as a whole. They had to get rid of Big Mom because of how destructive she was and because of the terrible insult that she caused in killing one of their most valued members of the community. But I think that the love for the humans that was established through Mother Carmel is still very much ingrained in their culture. We saw in Linlin's flashback that Mother Carmel was well loved and respected due to her saving them, but they didn't want to give up their warrior ways for trade, as she seemed to have suggested. However, when she protected Linlin by creating the sun and claiming that it was from the sun god, I think in that moment she earned their reverence, not just their respect. They were planning on killing Big Mom up to that point. And even when they were reminded that the Pride of Elbaf was at stake for not killing the one that had killed one of their elders, they decided to banish her instead. We know from Dory and Bragi how hugely important Elbaf's pride is, yet they let her live. In fact, they so hugely valued Mother Carmel that when they banished her, they followed them and helped build their new settlement off the island. Anything for the one that had saved them and manifested a miracle from their sun god. So I do think that in Big Mom's flashback, we witnessed the beginning of their love for humans be ingrained. And I don't think that that broke with Big Mom's rampage. So that very well may have been the beginning of their love for humans, but I also think it was the beginning of the shame for Elbaf. Again, what about Elbaf's pride? We already know that Elbaf lost some of its greatest power after Dory and Bragi left. And I think that this moment is where they also lost their pride. I imagine it was shortly after this incident with Big Mom that they started changing their stance on peace. We know that Big Mom was a kid at the same time that Gerd and how do you say his name again? Hyrudin. We already know that Big Mom was a kid at the same time that Gerd and Hyrudin were kids, and now Big Mom, you know, she's grown. They are too. It hasn't been that long since that's happened, so it's very possible that King Harold was already king at the time, or maybe was a new king after this incident. But regardless, I think very shortly after this, that's when the culture started changing. Ripley said that she is among some of the last generation of warriors, and all the younger generation, they have been raised up with this new, more peaceful belief system, peaceful to the point that they won't even they say they won't even verbally insult people. So them being warriors, them being fighters, that was their pride. They stripped their entire culture of what they once believed to be the pride of their culture. So I wonder if, as we start to explore the culture of Elbaf more, as we get deeper into this arc, if we're also going to uncover the shame that's tied up in the history of where they lost the very thing that they once took the most pride in. I mentioned in my last chapter review that I think that there's a rumbling of sorts coming through. The fact that this is now a very pacifist culture and they completely reject any form of violence whatsoever, or at least they say that they do. And now we have not only people like Ripley who show that that the older generation hasn't completely shaken that off, but we also have the Straw Hats coming in, and fights always follow them. We have Dory and Bragi coming back, who still live by the culture that Elbaf had established and that they've always known. They don't know that Elbaf has changed drastically, as well as several other giants that have been off the island of Elbaf and haven't witnessed the cultural change and still live by the values that were once instilled in the older generation. They're coming back to this island all at once. There's conflict coming. Loki very clearly does not live by the new values of the island. He still very clearly believes in honor and pride and fighting for his honor. And I mentioned this before, but I think that if Loki actually truly did kill his dad, and it's not all just a setup and a lie, if he wasn't framed and he actually did it, I think it's because he doesn't believe that what his dad was doing by turning them into a peaceful nation was good for their nation. In fact, it might have been that Loki believed, this is our greatest shame. You are shaming us before the world. And that might have been why he fought for the pride of Elbaf, for the honor of Elbaf. Not just because of the devil fruit that's passed down from generation to generation. He would have gotten that anyway as the heir to the throne, but potentially for the thing that Elbaf once valued above every other thing. One thing I noticed while rereading some of the early chapters of Little Garden and to prepare for this video is that there are some subtle parallels between the two arcs. Bones are scattered in the introduction of Little Garden, just like they are in the underworld at the introduction of Elbaf. There are huge beasts that kill anyone that enters the island, but the giants just enjoy hunting them, just like what happens in Elbaf. And there's other little things like that, but also the fight that the Straw Hats were engaging in Little Garden is that of a restoration of pride. The honor of the fight was snuffed in Little Garden, and the warrior's honor is everything to them. So much so that to not stand up and fight, even when the fight becomes unfair, would be a disgrace to the very name of Elbaf. That's exactly what happened when they chose to banish Big Mom after she killed one of their most honored warriors. And the Straw Hats entered the fight of Little Garden to restore the honor of the giants and to help them continue fighting according to what they believed in. And it's the fact that the giants couldn't fight with honor that made the Straw Hats enter into that fight. Most islands we visit, we see a people under oppression. Their lives have been stripped of them by a tyrannical ruler, and the Straw Hats come in to defeat that ruler and to free the island of their oppressor. We clearly have conflict coming in on Elbaf, and I have no doubt in my mind that an arc taking place on a once war land will include a war at some point. I do wonder though if the thing that we're freeing Elbaf from isn't an oppressive ruler, but of their shame. Luffy seems to have made a deal to free Loki, and Loki promised Luffy that if he freed him, he'd defeat one of Luffy's enemies for him. I do wonder if when the pressure amps up in this fight, if Luffy will free Loki, and he'll find the key, free Loki, and then Loki will team up with Luffy to help him defeat the enemy of this arc. Not something from the inside of the arc, but external world government threats, antagonists, like what happened in Egghead. And that will be the enemy that Loki will help Luffy to defeat, like he promised when they were first introduced. Back in Little Garden, they explained to us that the culture of Elbaf is that if they were not to show up to a fight, that would tarnish their very name as a warrior. It would be to lose their very selves. Elbaf started off with a subversion of what we expected of the culture of Elbaf, but according to what Dorian Bragi taught us of the culture of old, what's essentially happened, or at least what will have happened in the eyes of the warriors returning, is that Elbaf has lost its very self. So bringing it back to what I keep bringing it back to in this video, I wonder if the subversion here isn't just that the culture is different from what we expected, but also the freeing that the Straw Hats will be doing isn't your typical antagonist, evil rule kind of thing that the series has gotten us accustomed to, but rather that it'll be a subversion of that, and that what we'll really be doing is restoring Elbaf's pride. Maybe it'll be a more subdued version of what their legend once was, you know, burning ships, raiding, pillaging, terrors of the sea. Maybe it'll be a more subdued version of that, maybe a balance between the peace, the traitor. We like being traitors, but also, you know, our culture is going to be restored as well. The pride of being a warrior and being able to defend their island if ever it were under attack. I don't know if any of this is true, obviously. I think a good story lays clues, some that are large clues, some that are really subtle that readers can piece together, but also a good story doesn't signpost things so clearly that every story beat can be guessed. So I expect to be very wrong in everything that I predict, but if we went in this direction, I think it would be a fun subversion of expectations, and I think that it would be fitting with what we've learned so far about the culture of Elbaf, how it's changed, but also how much conflict that could bring with the older generation that's been gone for a long time. What do you think? Do you think the culture of Elbaf is actually important at all, or do you think that I'm just pulling at things that generally Oda doesn't care about? It's very possible it's that one. But I've been very fascinated with the change in the culture of Elbaf and all the implications that it potentially holds, so I wanted to present it to you here. Please do chat with me more in the comments. I would love to continue discussing this with you. I'll see you again soon. Bye.